former US Congressman Ron Paul. Ron, welcome to the programme. Now, NATO accuses the Russian president of threatening US allies with new weapon systems. But Mr. Putin says it's only for Washington to calculate the cost of their actions. He's talking about the withdrawal from the INF treaty here. So what message is he trying to send to the international community and especially Washington?
Well, I think it's a reasonable message. I'd have to tend to agree with the sentiments that Putin has expressed, because I saw no purpose. I think the initiation of or acceleration of the animosity between the two countries came by the U.S.'s canceling out of INF, out of the treaty, and that opened up the door for this. So I think it's reasonable for defensive purposes to do this. But I think our justification, or the president's justification for getting out, was that he wanted to participate in building some of his own weapons that way, and I think he's thinking about China and other places. But no, I think it was wrong for us to do that. I think Putin has responded in a reasonable manner. I'd like both of them to just quiet down, but I think that right now Putin has a more legitimacy in responding to us getting out of that treaty.
In the address, though, there was call for cooperation between countries. So why is NATO zooming in on the only parts they interpret as a threat here?
That I don't know why they would do this, because it doesn't make any sense to me, because it seems like I'm a long way from the position that most all governments hold, and that is always preparing for war and being careful and animosity. And yet my institute and my position in Congress has always been, we don't need to do all this. It doesn't make any sense. Why haven't we taken real advantage of the elimination of the Cold War in 1989, 1990? That was a great time. But we've drifted away from it, and I wished I could just not have to say, well, maybe we have responsibility for some of that. Maybe we can blame somebody else. But I don't think that would be right. I think that we have taken a position that we should make sure everybody knows who's running, who's the boss, and that we want to build weapons. We just get out of a treaty. I think that is not good, and I just wished we could work on people getting along together, because if you threaten somebody, or it looks like you are, a country then is obligated, to protect themselves if they think it's an attack that might come because of the rhetoric.
Well, why do you think we've been seeing these headlines already appearing of Putin threatening the US with new weapons? Why is this the media's focus?
Well, because it gets your attention. If he has a new weapon, they will say, well, why is he doing this? And if they don't think it through, then they can blame him and blame Russia for it, without thinking about, well, maybe you should listen to his explanation of why. And if we're more likely to put more weapons on the borders, which is part of the policy right now, then thinking defensively, a country has a right to prepare if weapons look like they may be turned against them. I don't think that's exactly the case, but it certainly can be interpreted that way. So as far as I'm concerned, it was just totally unnecessary getting out of that treaty, because it's bound to accelerate in the conflict. And yet I've always wanted to argue the case that there's no reason in the world why two countries like Russia and the United States can't get along together. And we were doing pretty well right after the downfall of the Soviet system, and there was a lot of trading. There's still a lot of trading, and it's not unanimous. I think we have a more aggressive policy toward Iran than the Europeans do, because I work on the assumption that has been taught traditionally in the United States, is that the goal is to have peace by trading and dealing with people, and not by force of arms and telling people, intimidating, putting on sanctions. That, I think, is detrimental.
Let's talk about the Poseidon system a little bit. It's said to nullify US efforts in creating a global missile defense network. Is that so? Can Washington avoid the system?
Well, I don't know whether they can. It's just a shame that we're at that point. But no, I'd like to see less of these weapons and less of the reason to build these defensive weapons. And it's almost no matter where we stand on the rhetoric, there's a lot of propagandizing. Our government has to speak to a certain group of people or be pressured by certain groups of people. I imagine that's true in all countries, that they can't look weak because they want their government to defend them. So I think they have their motivations, they're justified. But my argument, since I don't know all those details, is that we ought to have an open ear and not be doing things that amplifies the disagreements, because I think that's more likely to have an accidental breakdown. It might be just rhetoric, strong rhetoric, to show that both sides are tough, but eventually, accidents can happen, and then there are ramifications. That, to me, is something that we should all be concerned about.
But looking at the bigger picture as well here, do you think the unveiling of the weapons will convince the US to reconsider their withdrawal from the INF treaty?
I wish so, but I think it'd be hard for Trump and all to swallow that. No, I don't think they'll reconsider it. Let's just hope that a few of us can make the point that it wasn't necessary and that we ought to go forward without doing what maybe they did that for, was to build more weapons, for us to build on more weapons. So if we can't get back in the treaty and agreement, we ought to get people on our side to understand that we don't need more weapons. And besides, I think the United States is pretty strong. We spend the most money on weaponry. I don't feel intimidated if somebody's going to attack us, but we can make mistakes, and we do spend a lot of money. But we also know that compared to what the other countries are spending and what we spend, it's not a close guess, because we spend more than probably the next 10 countries all put together. So I think we're a lot safer than the people in Washington and the people who build our weapons claim we are, because even if it's not for the fact of aggression and starting a war, I think people, when they make profits building weapons, they're likely to promote problems.
Well, thank you for your thoughts on the address earlier today. My guest, former US Congressman Ron Paul. Thank you.